Now, I'd like to transition us into our next plenary session, Leading Corporate Climate Action, Real-World Lessons from Chief Sustainability Officers. So this session will bring together senior sustainability leaders to explore what effective corporate climate leadership actually looks like in practice. We'll move beyond strategy on paper and into the reality of execution, how leaders are making decisions under uncertainty, navigating trade-offs between climate ambition and business priorities, and working across finance, operations, and the C-suite to embed climate into core business strategies. Ultimately, this conversation is about what it takes to turn commitments into action and how companies can scale that impact. This session will be moderated by Jen Graham, Senior Associate Director of the MIT Sloan Sustainability Initiative. Please join me in welcoming Jen and our panelists on stage.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, thank you so much, Zara. All right, how is everybody doing? Woo, how was lunch? Did you all go to the startup showcase? Did you all network and get a job offer? Not yet. Okay, we still have time. I am thrilled to be moderating this conversation because we're tackling a question that a lot of organizations are grappling with now. How do senior corporate sustainability leaders turn climate ambition into real business strategy? And we are incredibly fortunate to have two outstanding leaders with us who are doing exactly that work at scale. First, we have Johanna Jobin, Vice President and Global Head of Environment and Sustainability at Takeda. Johanna is leading efforts at the intersection of planetary and human health, and under her leadership, Takeda has accelerated its path to net zero operations by 2035 and net zero value chain by 2040. Her work has been recognized by Fast Company's World-Changing Ideas Award, and she's been named one of the Boston Business Journal's 40 Under 40, alongside serving on several impactful boards. Welcome, Johanna.
Thank you.
Then we have Ellen Jakowski, Chief Sustainability Officer at MasterCard, where she leads the company's impact strategy, including MasterCard's commitment to reaching net zero emissions by 2040. Ellen is a recognized climate leader, named to the Time 100 Climate Leaders list, and brings extensive experience from her previous role as Chief Impact Officer at HP. She's also deeply engaged across a number of leading global sustainability organizations and advisory boards. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you.
So with that, I'm really looking forward to digging into this conversation, learning from both of you, and hopefully surfacing some insights that everyone here can take back to their own organizations. So let's get started with a grounding question. To kick us off, I would love to hear from each of you. Please share how sustainability shows up in your business today and how your industry shapes where you focus and where you can have the most impact. Johanna, can we start with you?
Wonderful. So hi, everybody. So glad to be here. I felt we needed some walk-in music. That was the longest walk, and I was like, why is there no theme music? But hi, everybody, Johanna Jobin. I love to talk about this because I really want to frame climate as a health issue. So, and our, this issue is directly tied to our environmental sustainability goals. So the World Health Organization has said that climate is humanity's greatest threat. It's also said that by 2030, there will be an additional 250,000 deaths each year. So a company focused on improving and saving lives, we must take action on climate change. So another issue is that we're not just concerned about individual patient health. We know that climate is exacerbating disease burden, but we also need to think about the healthcare system because we need to ensure continuity of care. So the World Economic Forum has also said that over the next years, climate is going to increase healthcare costs by $1.1 trillion. Now, we know how strapped our healthcare system is already. Can you imagine trying to face that burden? The other issue is that while we are contributing to improving public health, we're also part of the problem. So the way that we bring about our medicines, we're inadvertently contributing to the problem. And so the WHO has said that the healthcare sector actually contributes to about 5% of the world's global greenhouse gas emissions. So that is why our industry, and especially us at Takeda, is looking to take action on climate. We have some of the most ambitious targets in our industry. So you noted we're net zero by 2035 and net zero across our value chain by 2040. There's only 2 other companies that are doing that, and that's Novartis and Pfizer. And I think that one of the things at Takeda is that we are a 245-year-old company, and we take a long-term view. And I'm proud to be working at Takeda because we're truly a values-based organization. So we're thinking about how sustainability is embedded into our company's strategy, and we're concerned about not just delivering a more sustainable business, but improving the lives of the patients and communities we serve. One of the things about Takeda that's unique is a decision-making framework. So it's a PTRB, so putting our patients first, building trust with society, reinforcing our reputation, and building that long-term sustainable business. So what we do at Takeda is so important, but we have to think broadly across not just how our patients are dealing with climate, but the overall healthcare ecosystem.
Great, thank you. Ellen?
Yeah, so first of all, again, so excited to be here, Jennifer. I've never been to MIT. I've been to Boston a bunch of times, to some of the other universities in town, but never here. So really excited to be here. So I'm from MasterCard. And first of all, who has a MasterCard? Hopefully a bunch of you. Thank you, this is awesome. Excellent.
Thank you.
Well done. So when you think about who is MasterCard, right? We're payments technology. So we have over 150 million merchants on our network. So 150 million places in the world you can use your MasterCard. Thousands of banking partners, and this number I think is really interesting. 3.5 billion cards in circulation. So again, thank you to those of you who are part of the 3.5 billion. But put that in perspective, 8 billion people on the planet, right? 3.5 billion cards. We're in a very unique and powerful position in the center of the financial economy to drive a more sustainable, regenerative economy. So obviously, when you think about consumption and how people are purchasing things, right? That's kind of our business, right? Facilitating all of those transactions. How do we make sure that as resources and materials continue to get limited, we're all feeling the pressures of climate change? How do we help enable our merchants on the network to offer more sustainable products and services? And how do we incentivize the card holders to want to purchase more sustainable, regenerative, circular products? So that's kind of the big goal. That's what I work on every single day. And back to why does that matter to the business? Again, trends are changing. I think we'll get into some of the data around what we see from consumers. And of course, we have a lot of data to look at and to analyze. So as we project, what is the future of consumption? The future of consumption, we know it does need to be sustainable and regenerative. For us to stay in business, for us to continue to grow, this is really important. And just to that point of how are we doing, you mentioned, Jennifer, that we have a net zero goal by 2040. In our 2024 impact report, we announced that we had grown the business by 12% net revenue. So good job, MasterCard. If you've watched our stock price, it's done quite well over the years it's existed. So 12% growth in 2024 with a 7% reduction in our emissions. And that's across scope 1, 2, and 3. So the name of the game, right? The holy grail is to decouple your growth from your emissions. And there are a few companies that are on track with that, and we're one of them, which is super exciting because the agenda is big here, but it is how we drive our business at the core.
Fantastic, thank you both. So pivoting, and to talk a little bit more about decision making and trade-offs that you might have faced in leadership, can each of you walk us through a recent high-stakes climate decision where the path forward wasn't clear? What made it difficult, and how did you ultimately decide? Maybe Ellen, we'll start with you.
Sure. So, the decision-making process for all sorts of either investments or strategy shifts. Obviously, it incorporates a bunch of different mechanisms. And price, of course, is one. How much do things cost? So one of the recent decisions that we've taken, and back to our carbon footprint, like what's the biggest part of MasterCard's carbon footprint? You can probably guess. Data centers, technology, right? It's the systems that sit behind all of those transactions. So one, we have a commitment to 100% renewable energy, and we have been using 100% renewable energy for years. But as we look at things like AI capability, how do we continue to grow our compute power, which we and almost every other organization out there in the world today, and it's in the news all the time, like we need to grow that. That is a fact for us to stay in business and continue to grow and serve our customers as everything shifts. This is something we need to do. But again, how do we do that while continuing to deliver on our commitment to have 100% renewable energy as well as stay on the pathway to net zero? So one of the decisions when we looked at our technology portfolio, kind of the biggest area of focus is our data center in St. Louis. That's the big one. That's the big focus. And the grid there is highly constrained. So we've been working with the power providers over time to grow our need there in a sustainable way. But we kind of came to the point where we needed to do something differently. So there's a big field across from the MasterCard office in St. Louis. And the idea was, should we invest, buy the land, invest and build our own solar system? And we had to kind of go through that process of, this is additional cost. We had some other choices, like we could actually move the data center to a different location, right? That has a bigger capacity for growth and expansion. We could have outsourced that. There were lots of different models that we were looking through. But in the end, it was the detailed business case of how do we explain the investment, the return time and all of those things, and the trade-offs of the other options. So the good news is our leaders are committed to our climate goals. They understand how it grows the business. And we do have this philosophy at the company. It's called doing well by doing good. So doing well, grow the business, continue to expand, return to shareholders, right? Priority. By doing good, by ensuring that we're delivering environmental and social impact. So those two things need to be considered with every key business decision. And in that case of the solar panel system, we were able to justify the investment given the long-term strategy and that sort of thing.
Fantastic. Thank you. Johanna?
So I just want to say that as a sustainability professional, we live in the gray, we live in the murky. I feel like there's so much that's left to interpretation where you have to figure out, and scenario play and figure out what is the best pathway for your company. So if you all want to be in this field, just make sure you're agile and you're okay to live in this ambiguity. I would say that the path is clear often on scope 1 and 2 emissions. So the International Energy Association has said by 2030, we can reach our goals with available technologies today. That's wonderful. And we at Takeda, we're already at about a 60, almost a 60% emissions reduction in our scope 1 and 2 emissions. What's not clear is our value chain emissions. And that's about 90% of our overall carbon footprint. So 90%. And in order to achieve reductions, let's say by 2040 in our case, or even 2050 for a lot of other companies or even countries around the world that have those commitments, we need new innovation and we need new technology. One area that of focus for Takeda has been on these value chain emissions and on a longer term issue, which is around hard to abate emissions. So when I joined Takeda almost 3 years ago, I sat with my team and we had a nice net zero roadmap. It was a beautiful picture. I think they worked with BCG on this. It was a beautiful reduction pathway. We had a number of different levers like solar and all the things that you would think, fleet, reducing emissions, more sustainable procurement and all of this. But there was like this little shaded area in gray. And I said, well, what is that? Because it's about 15% of our footprint. And I said, it's a shaded area in gray. They're like, those are hard to abate emissions. And I said, okay, so what are we going to do about it? They're like, we have no plan. So we worked on this net zero roadmap, but there was no plan for 15% of our carbon footprint. And that's because hard to abate emissions, it's not clear. It doesn't mean that there's innovative technology on the market today or even cost-effective solutions. So I said, well, we need to start focusing on that. 2040 is not too far away. So what we did is we realized that we broke down what are some of the sources of emissions, and one of the sources is pharmaceutical product packaging. So how our patients and customers actually dispose of our products. We have no control over them. So what we did is we decided to partner with a local area hospital, Boston Medical Center, to launch an innovative collaboration, first of its kind, to address medical waste and the emissions associated from medical waste. And in doing so was a novel concept. The amount of political capital that I had to spend to get our company to believe in this, to say, hey, this is a long-term issue. Do we really have to spend the money now? Do we need to do this? And I said, well, yes, because this is sort of a research project. We need to sort of incubate and sort of be the catalyst in this industry to figure out what can we do to drive solutions. And then once we identify that, we want to scale and encourage others to adopt this. So we just launched our first report from our first year milestones for BMC. Definitely check it out. I'm putting a plug in here selfishly. Check it out on the website, because by that learning, we want others in the healthcare ecosystem to take this on and drive solutions and scale it over time. So that's an example where it's not clear, right? And sometimes we have to take a risk and to try to drive innovation in unlikely areas.
And just expanding on that, Johanna, how did you build that confidence internally?
Like I said, a lot of political capital. So building confidence for these initiatives takes credibility, takes governance, and also we use at Takeda often a risk-based approach. So overall governance is one of the biggest tools that we use to drive alignment around key initiatives. So boots on the ground, people at our manufacturing facilities, people in the labs. We have project teams focused on climate, nature initiatives, our product sustainability initiatives. That then rolls up to an overarching, what we call our planet operating team, which is a cross-functional group. We meet monthly. All areas of the business are connected to understand what we're doing, how we're going about it, what's our performance. Quarterly, we have our executive sponsors focused on our planet goals that we report up to, and then that goes to an overarching executive group called the Business and Sustainability Committee that makes decisions, and of course decisions, and they have to approve certain amounts over a certain dollar threshold, and then about once a year we report to the board. So governance is an incredible way to ensure that you're looking at all the issues, the risks and the opportunities within the initiative. And to get that BMC initiative across, we had to go right up through to the Business and Sustainability Committee, because it was a novel concept, it was a new area, and we had to get the trust of the CEO and all the executives to sign on to it. Takeda is very big on consensus building. A second piece that I think is so important as a tool is even benchmarking. Let me just say that, because our company executives love to hear what other companies are doing, not just in our industry, but other leading companies. So I'm going to include MasterCard in all of our benchmarking analyses, because you guys are doing a great job. But benchmark, I can't tell you how many times an executive will ping me on LinkedIn to be like, hey, did you see what AstraZeneca just launched? Did you see what Novartis just launched? So I feel like that can be a powerful tool in your back pocket to showcase what everybody are doing. And sometimes your executives, they want to be the first at something, like in this case with BMC, or they just want to be sort of middle of the pack. Another one I said is the risk-based approach. So this is important because we look at financial risk, we look at regulatory risk, we also look at things like reputation risk, and that adds a lot in terms of what we're doing. And so all of those factors really help to ascertain and give credibility into our initiatives.
Fantastic. Both of you mentioned embedding climate into the overall business strategy at your companies. So Ellen, would love to start with you. MasterCard has embedded sustainability into its products and customer-facing strategy. How did that shift happen internally?
Sure. Well, again, as I mentioned, when we think about consumption and how things are changing, we have something at MasterCard called the MasterCard Economics Institute. And by the way, I'm sure you've all seen Masterclass, like they advertise a lot, right? They're on my feed all the time. Take a class with Anna Wintour and learn about leadership, or Serena Williams and learn about ambition, or whatever it is. So over the weekend, I was scrolling, and who popped up on Masterclass but the chief economist from MasterCard. So I need to give a plug for her, Michelle Meyer, phenomenal. But anyway, so Michelle's team and my team have partnered on really looking at all of those transactions, all of that data to understand how our market's evolving. And she did a report for us last year around online luxury apparel spend, right? So what percentage in the US of online luxury apparel spend do you think is secondhand? And she brought me the research report in draft, and the number was, drum roll, 27%. I was like, 27%, that's over a quarter of the market, almost a third. Like, there's no way that's true. So I was like, Michelle, thanks. Can you just go back to the team? I'd like to see the math behind here. Like, where's this really coming from? It's true, 27%, right? Wow. And then, by the way, in the same report, what was the data for just regular purchases, not luxury? 5.4%. All of the apparel purchases online in the US, 5.4, still, for me, I thought that was higher than I would have expected. But what an incredibly powerful signal, right? Now, why is that, right? For one reason, of course, sustainability, I want to promote that one. Like, oh, all of the quarter of the market really cares about sustainability. Okay, maybe. But they also care about affordability, right? Especially now, tariffs, fuel prices are increasing, people want to save money. And people also, of course, love like their Gucci logos and all of those things. So the demand is there, and secondhand is a way that people can afford this. So looking at data like that, and then communicating that internally, like, hey, everybody, did you see the latest data on how sustainability markets are growing, on how secondhand shopping is shifting? And it's not just when you look at the generational patterns of this, is this just Gen Alpha? Like, no, it's spread across. And of course, the young are leading the way, so thank you to many of you for continuing to drive these trends. But that helps shape our business, that helps shape our products and services. So we're doing a lot on agentic pay. Agent pay, we're all going to have these agents, right, that shop for us and pick things out. So we've taken that data, and we're sitting down with our head of AI to say, as we evolve agent pay at MasterCard, how do we make sure that the agents are pulling through secondhand as well, knowing that at least a quarter of the market is there in the US, in Europe, it's even bigger. And by the way, quick aside, because I'm just shocked by this, I was in Frankfurt Airport the other day. And I was walking through, and they force you to go through duty-free on your way to the gate. So I'm going through the long, duty-free. They had a section of duty-free in Frankfurt Airport that was titled Pre-Loved Luxury, right? And it had, the Louis Vuitton purses and all those things. And so I talked to the sales assistant. I said, oh, how long has this been here? Who comes? Who's buying this? And she said, well, first thing, notice the area of the Pre-Loved Luxury in Frankfurt Airport, there's like 2 products sitting on the shelf. It was empty. And the sunglass case next to it, which was not pre-loved, just regular, like full, the clothing rack full. But the pre-loved luxury, she said, we cannot keep enough in stock because, of course, not only is it tax-free, but then there's the price savings. All of that to say, we're building products and services around this as we evolve agent pay, but looking at the data and understanding where the market is moving, that's how we continue to evolve our products.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Johanna, at Takeda, how are you integrating sustainability across the value chain, from operations to product lifecycle, and where has been the most challenging?
So I mentioned that 90% of our emissions come from our value chains. We have to look upstream and downstream. In the pharma world, when you think about integrating sustainability into our products, I like to think about our product portfolio, so those that are still within R&D, phase 1, 2, and 3, or even starting with our clinical trials, or our commercial products. So to integrate sustainability, we kind of think about them in 2 camps. So the first one is working with our R&D colleagues and embedding what we call a sustainability by design process. So we think that about 80% of our products' impacts can be taken care of, hopefully through the design phase. And through that, we address issues like what's the materials that this product should be composed of, what are the starting materials, what the packaging can be like. And already, with some of our products, we conduct life cycle assessments, so we know, through phase 1, 2, and 3, each phase has its own LCA developed, and so we can map what the product impacts are all throughout. In R&D, one product that we're working on right now in our portfolio, we're changing the starter material, and so it's hopefully going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about 28%, just getting through the R&D phase. In a commercial setting, it's a lot harder to get things done. I know financial services are highly regulated. Pharma is highly regulated as well, so we have to ensure that efficacy, safety, sterility, patient safety, all of those things, quality, are taken into account. So if we want to change packaging or even those e-leaflets that you get in your pharmaceutical product, it's highly regulated, and it takes time to put something in there. So we have to work with our regulatory teams, we have to work with quality, we have to work with our asset teams to focus on this, to really drive sustainability. One of the biggest levers we've been driving forward is working with our CMOs, so contract manufacturing organizations, and even suppliers. So really ensuring that as part of the criteria to do business with Takeda is including sustainability. So whether or not a CMO has science-based climate targets, or starting to embed renewable energy into some of their operations. So this is going to impact our emissions greatly. The last thing I'll say is that I think, so one of the other big areas of focus has been also around our distribution and logistics. We're working on an air-to-sea freight program, which saves the company money, let's be honest. Sea freight is a lot cheaper than air freight, but it also greatly reduces our overall greenhouse gas emissions. One of the more unique solutions that we recently came up with was investing in a new cargo sailing ship. So this is a trimaran, a kind of first of its kind, to ship some of our pharmaceutical products. And we worked with them to design temperature-controlled capabilities to be able to handle pharma products. And so we launched this last year. I'll say this, the ship is being built, but we do hope to set sail later this fall from Europe over to America. It's a program like that where it's unique, but it does have a strong business case. And the business case is less the financials, but it's more about the opportunity to have business resiliency and continuity, because this trimaran can get into ports faster than some of those bigger cargo ships. So it's just some of the ways that we're integrating sustainability across everything that we do.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting. I would love to touch on AI, and Ellen, you had mentioned this briefly in your response, so would love to welcome you to respond first and then hear from Johanna. Where is AI starting to meaningfully shape your sustainability strategy, whether in operations, product development, or decision making?
Yeah, so I mentioned a couple of examples, and there was a discussion here at MIT, I guess earlier this week. Ruth Porat from Alphabet was here on campus, and I was reading on her feed. This is a little less about sustainability, but I think when you think about MasterCard and who we are, the other aspect of our impact strategy, another key aspect, is around driving financial inclusion and inclusive growth. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we just announced that in 2025, we hit our big goal of including 1 billion people into the digital financial economy. So people who were unbanked, moving them into banking. And again, back to doing well by doing good. Obviously, that grows our business, right? These are new people into the financial economy who now could obviously get a MasterCard. But for their quality of life and job prospects, all of those things, for their small businesses, this greatly helps them, right, be connected. But Ruth in her LinkedIn feed was on a panel, and I forget the person who said the comment that she quoted, but the comment was around inclusive AI. And if AI is not inclusive, all of the great problems that we face today on this world, so poverty, health issues, climate change, they will get worse and not better. And there was something, I'm not quoting it exactly, but I encourage you go to her feed and look at that quote. I mean, it really hit me. If AI is not inclusive, like there's lots that's been talked about in terms of responsible AI, right? And what does that mean, and how do we all govern on it, and all of those things. But inclusive AI, and just reflecting on the billion people we've just brought in to the digital financial economy. If we're not building these tools in a way that we can all benefit from them and we are all included, that gap, there was something in that comment that just really sunk in. So knowing how important to our business strategy, financial inclusion and inclusive growth is, what is growth going to be in the future? Like right now, as you're looking at all of these predictions and envisioning what this is going to do to your organization's strategy or business strategy, like everything is fundamentally being rewritten, right? The systems and how we all consume and buy and shop. We were talking about agents will be shopping for us. Like it's all going to shift. So we need to be extremely thoughtful about this. And our Center for Inclusive Growth, I just came from DC yesterday, where we held our annual Inclusive Growth Summit against the World Bank Spring Meetings. So we are putting this directly on the agenda to make sure that we are thinking as thoughtfully as we can. And again, given that we operate, basically in almost every single part of the world and the global economy, we need to make sure we're leading the way in some of this thinking to ensure that we are really thinking about the future and how are we going to make things better for everybody and not just an incredibly small subsegment of the population.
Thank you. Johanna?
Yeah, so I think AI for us is such an opportunity, but also brings its own environmental problems. So there was a study by Siemens in 2025 that polled a number of different government and corporate executives, and about 60% of them said AI is key to their decarbonization efforts over the next 5 years. And we at Takeda, we're starting to employ AI where we can. For example, we've started to pilot test it with vial defects. So right now we have people that sit in a line to look at defects in our vials, but if we can leverage AI, think about the time reduced, but also waste reduced. That is an exciting opportunity. But I would say that AI comes, like I said, with its challenges. There are environmental impacts, water, land use, energy that we all have to think about. Fortunately for us at Takeda, we don't own any of our data centers, and we're working with key suppliers to ensure that sustainability is embedded in their operations. So right now, AI use is about less than 1% of our overall carbon footprint. However, at every town hall and executive meeting this past year when we talked about AI, sustainability was the number one question, but it's less than our 1% of our overall footprint. We have to continue to monitor and ensure that if we think it's evolving, we have to continue to work with our suppliers to ensure how we can drive more renewable energy into that. I would say that also for AI, we're developing and identifying a number of use cases right now. So how it can improve with our performance monitoring, how it can improve our reporting and disclosures. I'll say this, that I do think foundationally, there's still some gaps that we have at our company in deploying AI. Simple data integrity and automation issues. I don't know if anybody has actually done carbon reporting, but you have to enter all of your utility data, and if that's not automated, there's a lot of mistakes that can be made. And so we're now trying to work on integrating systems, automating our data, so that we can really harness the opportunity of AI. We have a number of different opportunities at hand, but it's still a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Understandably. So this morning we had a plenary session called Breaking Through Gridlock. And part of that plenary session was all about driving internal alignment when it came to corporate sustainability strategies. So where have each of you encountered the most internal resistance to climate initiatives, and how have you worked through it? I'm going to open it up to either one.
I'm happy to go first. So nobody ever says they want to harm the environment. Right? Like, every time I go to talk to a person, they're not like, oh, we don't care about climate, we don't care about the environment. Nobody ever says that. Mm-hmm. It's more about investments and resources and what do we need to do now versus later. And so we always talk about ROI, which is such an important issue. I mentioned risk because also bringing in a risk-based approach is important because it also can allow you to think about physical risks, reputational risk, and other elements that you might not think of. One of the questions that I learned at Decatur was the word now. So we always say, what do we need to do to invest? But it's what do we need to do to invest now? Or is it later? And so the question's always been, yes, we need to take action on this, but do we need to take action now or 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And that is now kind of what we're wrestling with in terms of a lot of our investments, especially in our own manufacturing facilities, even within Scope 3, we're trying to figure out what is the best business benefit and getting the most value out of it. One example I mentioned was that initiative for Boston Medical Center. I mean, that took a tremendous amount of political capital to understand and to get momentum to implement and get a project like that approved. But then we have projects every day that we're making decisions on, like our technology, where our ROI is, we aim to try to get it below three years. But a lot of our projects now, especially when you think about heat pump technologies and some of our aging infrastructure in our manufacturing facilities, we're looking at 10 to 12. So that's where the questions of risk and all these other opportunities come to play. Most often, especially with our Scope 1 and 2 areas, there's a business case to be had, and there's value in terms of reducing energy, driving efficiencies, optimizing costs, and reducing risk. But we're never at the table to be like, let's harm the environment. It's more like, what do we have to invest and when?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add, there's a product that we have, it's called MasterCard Move. And the product was innovated to speed up cross-border transactions. Super successful, lots of growth inside the company. But there was somebody on their engineering team that was thinking one day about, is there a way to use MasterCard Move to enable circularity? So just to bring that visual, what does that actually mean? I don't know if anybody's been to Blenheim Palace in the UK where Winston Churchill was born. Anybody? Okay, a couple head nods. All right, excellent. So Blenheim Palace is a really great example to show like how could MasterCard Move be used for circularity. So when you go to the palace, right, it's a tourist site, you want to tour around, they have gorgeous gardens. There's a cafe, right? So you get thirsty, you go to the cafe, you order your tea, because you're in England, so of course it's going to be the tea. The barista says, here's your tea, it costs X much. I'm going to add on 2 pounds because I'm delivering this to you in a reusable cup. So you pay for your tea, you enjoy it around the grounds and in the palace. When you're finished, right next to the regular waste bins, there's a reverse vending machine, right? So it's convenient, it's easy, it's right where you would normally think you would put it, right, in the waste bin or the recycle bin, but it's this reverse vending machine. You drop the empty cup in the reverse vending machine, you tap your MasterCard or other card, and the 2 pounds comes back near instantaneously. So you've basically like rented your cup, for the time you were enjoying your tea walking around the palace. And what have they seen from that, right? What the CFO, last time I was there, sat down and it's like, we used to spend 100,000 pounds on single-use cups. We're now spending 50,000 pounds, half that, on these reusable cups. Ellen, this is amazing. Can we do it for the cold cups, not just the hot cups? Can we do it for pizza boxes? What can we do, right? Like, you're bringing money to my bottom line. This is doing well, right? Good for the business. But it's also doing good, of course, because it's the reduced waste, it's the reduced carbon. And what's also interesting is their customer experience scores popped up a little bit. There's something about, it's a small thing, right? Just putting that cup back in the reverse vending machine that makes people feel good and excited and happy. So it's win, 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 win. And again, for MasterCard, what does that mean? Well, MasterCard, of course, makes money on the transaction when you buy the coffee. But MasterCard also makes money when you put the cup in and you tap and you get your 2 pounds back, right? It's just like a portion, tiny, tiny portion of a penny. But like for us, that's also doing well. And we're enabling our merchant at Blenheim Palace to do good. So super cool example of this product that was innovated. But how does this tie to your question, right, of speed and scale and resistance and that sort of thing? So we had this beautiful example where we're like, isn't this amazing? And our chief administrative officer, when we were talking about this small pilot that we've worked on, we've proven the business case, and like, what should we do? And he's like, Ellen, imagine if every cup of coffee that's sold with a MasterCard goes from 1 transaction to 2, like, talk about growth of the business, like, we've cracked the code. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's just talk about the resistance. Like, what if we had them here, right, in this building? Like, the nice thing about Blenheim Palace is there's a big wall around it, right? There's a certain area. So by the time you've finished your beverage, like, you're moving beyond the wall. So other good places to think about this are like airports or sports centers or things like that, concert venues where there is something contained. We've been able to implement it now primarily in Europe. So Aarhus, Denmark, second biggest town, has I think about 35 of these reverse vending machines in the downtown area. So all of the cafes and bars, you can do it there. We just expanded it to Copenhagen. We've now expanded it to Lisbon. I was just in Lisbon, and I don't know if anyone's been to the Barrio Alto. That's like their party district with small little streets, and everybody goes in and gets their beers, and then they're all smushed out onto the street. So at the end of the night, all the trash in those cups, and they've decided to regulate that and say, no single-use cups, we want this. So we've got these small pockets. It's starting to scale, but the resistance is enormous, right? Because that's not how we consume today, right? We all like our mobile Starbucks cups that we use and then throw away, and we don't have to think about it. So one of the key reasons why are a lot of these pilots, almost all of them, in Europe? Regulation. They're regulating, just like Barrio Alto said, we need to clean up these streets, this is a problem. We are making it illegal to use single-use cups in this area. In Copenhagen, in the UK, in France, there's now regulation around this. So kind of thinking about back to the apparel example and the MasterCard Economics Institute data, there are situations where you do have momentum in the market, where consumers are choosing to change their behavior. They're excited, again, maybe because of the affordability of it, which also matches their value of sustainability. So that gives enough momentum for this to start to scale. But in this instance, like, changing behavior is so hard. But once you've done it, like, I parked myself when I was in Aarhus, Denmark. I parked myself at the little bench kind of in the middle of the downtown near one of the reverse vending machines. I'm like, are people using this? People are using this, right? Mm-hmm. It's older people, younger people in suits, people on bike shorts, whatever. The community has figured out, like, this is how we work. This is our system. So I think we spend a lot of time, again, like, we have these brilliant ideas, we have these exciting products that could have these multiple uses. One, those engineers that had this vision of MasterCard Move could be used for circularity. Part of the change we're trying to drive in MasterCard, and while I was also in DC for the World Bank Spring Meetings, we have one of our tech hubs in Arlington, Virginia. So I sat down in a room kind of like this with all of the employees to talk about MasterCard team members. You are on the impact team, you're on the sustainability team. And we talked about Blenheim Palace and the employees that they thought of it. It wasn't my sustainability team that thought of it. It's the product experts sitting in seat that are connecting those dots. So I'm going to jump a little bit to kind of a career conversation, because I get all of these questions of like, I want to be a chief sustainability officer. What's the pathway? How do I get on a sustainability team? The future is everybody's on the sustainability team, and the most powerful place you could probably choose to be, like those engineers that made that connection, they're driving possible scale, like the town of Copenhagen, Lisbon, Denmark, like they, without that idea, like think of the scale of change that they had the power to implement. Like, that's not coming from this seat, it's coming from a different seat. Or, for example, what's going on with the solar panel system at our technology team. That's the biggest part of MasterCard's carbon footprint. And it's our CTO, our Chief Technology Officer, and his team that have the power. At the end of the day, I can influence it, but they're making those decisions. So, anyway.
No, this is a great segue.
Perfect.
So before I ask our panelists my final question, I just want to remind the audience to submit your questions via the Whova app. And before we get to our final question, I want to also acknowledge the reality of this current moment. Obviously, this conference is geared toward MBA students, and the job market is tough. It's tighter. The shifts in federal policy have impacted funding. in very real ways, especially in climate and sustainability. Yet at the same time, we're continuing to see sustainability embedded across business functions, as you just pointed out, often in ways that look different from what students might expect. Here at Sloan, I just wanted to share a few placement stats. Within our own sustainability certificate cohort, over 95% of our students from the past 2 graduating classes have secured full-time roles across a variety of different industries. And a growing number of those students are stepping into roles where sustainability is not in the job title, but the understanding of climate and sustainability is essential to the scope of the role. And many of these opportunities are coming through networks, internships, projects, and relationships, reinforcing the importance of a network-based search in this space. So, final question to the panelists. Given the current job market and shifting policy landscape, where do you still see meaningful opportunities for MBA students to drive sustainability? And how should they position themselves to access these roles? Maybe Johanna, we'll start with you.
First of all, I feel for everybody. It's a crazy world, what's happening out there. But I think, part of what Ellen was saying, sustainability is embedded into every function now. It truly is. So you can think about, a couple different pathways. One is to be a sustainability professional, actually have sustainability in your title. Well, there's me, who leads a centralized team that drives all things sustainability at the company, but then there's people in sustainability in our engineering department, in our R&D department, in finance and procurement, even in our BioLife business where we're donating plasma. Like, there are people who have sustainability, and there are people who work on our sustainability projects that don't even have a title. So I really want to encourage you, yes, there's a pathway for sustainability professionals and to kind of serve as the leaders in driving the work, being an activist, advocating for the work, showing the business case, doing scenario planning, focus on performance monitoring or even reporting, and really trying to build the momentum to get this work done. But a lot of the innovation and a lot of the work is coming from those within the functions that I partner with to deliver and to implement and execute the work. I'll also say that a big part of the job growth is also get a key skill, right? Like I mentioned, life cycle assessments. That is a skill that we are leveraging now, not just within our R&D teams, my team, our product teams, thinking about leveraging different technologies and understanding the various, energy technologies. You were talking about scenario planning for energy. That is all needed skills. I would also say that look to not just the big brands and big companies. There are so many, thousands of small and medium-sized business enterprises that have not even tapped into sustainability yet and are now being hit by maybe regulations like the state of California on reporting, or regulations or supplier commitments, right? And so think about maybe as you enter into this world, think about the smaller companies where you can build and drive a program. Half of my jobs, I had to create my own, and a job wasn't really, it wasn't on LinkedIn. It was something that through networking I had to create and build myself. So that could also be an opportunity. And then I'll also say consulting. Consulting is a great way to give you exposure to a number of different industries, a number of different skill sets that you could always harness and parlay forward. I started my career in consulting, and it kind of gives you a sense of which fields you want to go into. So that's always a good starting place as well.
And just to build on that, it was really the beginning of what you said, which I think we both firmly believe. Yeah. Everybody's on the sustainability team. Everybody in the world, we all have an impact. Part of the discussion again I was having with our employees the other day, MasterCard has a net zero goal by 2040. It's dated by 2040 because it's a decade ahead of climate science, 2050. What has to happen by 2050, right? MasterCard, for sure, it needs to be net zero because it's 10 years after our goal. But the United States does, right? Countries do. My household needs to. Me as an individual needs to, right? For the world to hit that target, we all have to figure this out. So again, whatever seat you're sitting in, whatever choices you're making, whether individual, household, community, your company, the decisions that you make. And oftentimes the more powerful positions are the ones that don't have sustainability or climate or whatever in the title. That's where the real shift is going to be happening. And in this world, looking at AI and how that's going to affect all of us in our jobs and our organizations, making sure we're really thinking about and including that in the boundaries of the prompts that you're creating, the questions that you're creating, how you're structuring your actions and your organization's actions. So this field is as wide as it gets. The opportunity, I think, literally exists in almost every place in the world. So I don't think it's limited. Maybe not as useful of a tactical answer, but I do think it's a mindset, right? It's a mindset of how I think we all need to be acting together. And just the frame of that, right? I think we're watching Artemis 2 and those incredible images of the planet, right? And then there's the reality of what we're sitting in today, the health impacts that you were talking about, of what are we putting into our body in terms of microplastics, of the extreme heat. I was in DC, it was 90 degrees, it's April, the cherry blossoms blossomed earlier than ever, all of these things. So we're all sitting in a role today. So there's a future role, but there's the role you're in today and the actions you're taking today and what you're designing today for tomorrow.
Excellent. Thank you both. Now I would love to pivot to some of the questions submitted via the Whova app from our audience. Question 1, how do you get corporations to invest in sustainable initiatives that may affect the profitability in the short term but pay off in the long term? And I will open it up to either of you.
Everything that we invest in needs a business case. And some of it does, most of the time, it saves us money and drives efficiencies. I'll be honest, a lot of our cost-cutting measures at the company, and for those, Takeda's in the headlines, we've been going through a transformation of our own as we get our new CEO, but a lot of our cost-cutting measures across the company also help reduce our Scope 3 commitments because we're buying and purchasing less. But a lot of our work, especially across our manufacturing sites, everything needs a business case. And like I said, the years of payback or ROI that we look to varies depending on the facility, what we're investing in, if it's one of our highly valued manufacturing facilities or something that we may close in the future. So everything needs to deliver on that. It's there is some sort of wiggle room and variability in terms of the years of payback. I'll also say that there are some initiatives that are sort of the catalyst for innovation. So one of our manufacturing facilities in Vienna, we're actually partnered with the Austrian Institute of Technology, which is, I think, kind of the equivalent to MIT in Austria. But we're actually piloting this innovative technology to generate the high heating demands that's needed for pharmaceutical manufacturing with no fossil fuels. So this is reducing about 80% of our emissions at this one facility. And we partnered with this association to try to figure out how we can prove the technology. And then we want to scale and share that with our own manufacturing network, but others across pharma.
Great, thank you. Ellen, would you like to weigh in at all?
No, you can go to the next
Okay. I really enjoyed this question. Sustainability officers have gone from basement office hideaways to front and center advisors for C-suites. Where have you seen the largest progress over the past 10 years within CSO roles and responsibilities? Where are companies comfortable taking action and where are they still hesitating?
I don't think I was ever in the basement. Were you? Do you want to go first?
Sure. So, another one of the things that I'm always saying is my job yesterday is not my job today, is not my job tomorrow, right? Like this, when I graduated college, the chief sustainability officer role didn't exist, right? And then all of a sudden, throughout my career, it started building momentum, and then all of a sudden there it was, right? So, tomorrow, and literally I mean tomorrow, the shape of my job continues to to form, right? And even when you think about some of the things that you were mentioning, some of the regulation and reporting, there's a big debate going on in sustainability reporting right now. Europe's leading the way with something called CSRD reporting standard, and even what we thought was certain there isn't certain. It's changing, it's evolving, the deadlines are shifting, all of these things. So, this concept of being agile, which Johanna, you were talking about, is so important. I think this applies to all sorts of roles, not just this particular role, but having kind of like the imagination of what could be possible, what could be next. And the question that I always ask myself is, how are we making impact? Like, where can we scale? How can we move at faster speed? And I know I keep bringing things back to AI, but the speed of business is just, get ready, right? Like, buckle your seatbelt, like, here we go with what is available to create, in 2 seconds, things that used to take, weeks to build, months to build, years to build. Like, we're able to build them, and you see where this is going, right? So, so what's the future of the CSO role? I don't know that I can predict that, but what I would say, again, back to, like, the more I can motivate people in our company to have that impact lens or that sustainability lens or that inclusive AI lens, like, put that on your decision making and your filters, and then set your ambition of, and my question is, like, how do we create more impact at scale, at speed? Those are the boundaries of, like, the future of this job, and tying everything, as you keep saying, to the business case of how are we going to continue to grow this company, grow this organization, while growing the impact, right? While doing good and delivering true social and environmental value, and really staying core to that.
I think I'd like just to add, so the evolving role of the CSOs, a couple things. One is, not all company has a CSO. They may not have that title, but there's definitely somebody in charge, like myself, that is driving this work. So you also need to kind of take a look at that and read between the lines, especially if you're looking for roles in this department. I think one of the things too was that where it used to be this tight nucleus of a centralized team is now becoming more decentralized and integrated across the business. I mentioned our finance team, our R&D team. These are some of our biggest stakeholders that we're working with on a regular basis. And before, where it used to be, hey, let's just go to the CEO because the CEO is passionate about this and they care, we're gonna get the money, we're gonna get this done. That's not how it works. We need executives, we need to leverage our governance and our systems and really ensure all of the executive team or even management and those on the manufacturing floor are all embedded and bought into this work. I feel like there was one other thing. I'm trying to think what else I was going to say on that issue. Oh, and then the evolving issue of CSOs, and I think this is what you were saying, the issues evolve. And that's what you have to do to stay on top of it. Because one year it may be climate, at the height of the pandemic, racial equity and all of those issues all became heightened awareness. You have to kind of anticipate what's happening around in the geopolitical landscape, clearly regulations and where the reporting's going. But you have to stay on top of what are those issues, and as they evolve, what's important to your company, and always keeping that top of mind. We're agile, it changes sometimes, not just on an annual basis, but even a quarterly or monthly basis.
Excellent, excellent. And I'm gonna ask our final question. How do you convince those who would profit off a worsening climate to help fight climate change?
That's a tough question.
That's a tough one.
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
That's the question. And I think there's short-term value, short-term value creation, and long-term. And oftentimes there's like that incredible trade-off, right? Back to just even the behavior change of the cup, right? Like, we all like to operate how we operate, right? If we've been profiting off of industries and in ways that aren't benefiting the environment, like, it's easier to continue down a path where the formula has existed and you see returns and all of those things. But there's the short term versus the long term, and the trends and the through line of what is, to your point about, like, what is happening around you, and being very aware of, like, what is that? So this is where I go again to the data. You could look at Michelle's report from the MasterCard Economics Institute and say, Well, 75, 3/4 of the market like to buy single use. Like, we are investing there, we're staying there. That's the big pot, right? Like, we are focusing there, right? And you miss the trend of where things are moving, right? And how are we going to continue to enjoy our beverages every single day in the way that we do? That's more of kind of long-term thinking. So I think paying attention to building your case around what is the future, what is the long-term opportunity, where is innovation coming, and really, putting pressure there, focusing there, and growing there. Like, I think that's the tension.
And I'll just add to that. Resources are finite. A lot of our natural resources are finite, and so at some point, the long-term view, something's got to give. Even large-scale oil companies have very robust sustainability programs. So even those who may be contributing or profiting off the problem have, energy efficiency measures. They also want to try to look to how I can reduce my electricity cost spend. And I think also each organization has variable stakeholders. Mm-hmm. So whether or not maybe investors is just one stakeholder group, you have regulations, you have your own employees who may be passionate about this, you might have customers who are passionate about this. At some point, I really truly think somewhere in your stakeholder mapping, there are people who are saying you need to take action on climate.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, there's so much more that I think we could unpack in this discussion, but I want to be mindful of time, so I'm going to close this out here. Ellen, Johanna, I want to thank you both for your time and your insights. Please join me in giving them both a round of applause. Thank you.